Um, so for those of you in the room, if there's an emergency, you can exit out the back of the room, either door, and go either direction down the hallway. Are there any agenda changes suggested?
I don't have an agenda change, but I do have an introduction I'd like to make, if
Let's
that's
do it.
okay. Sitting in the third row, I'd like to introduce our very newest staff member to the city of South Burlington, Bettina Miguez, who joined as our climate action manager yesterday. And she came back
Wow.
today, which is great. And she's going to be doing lots of work. Our first, as I said, first ever climate manager, climate action manager. She's going to be charged with all the work from the climate action plan, working collaboratively with departments across the city. I think that there'll be times when you'll be interfacing with her. And so she wanted to come both to see you all in action and get this presentation that Jesse and Alana are giving this evening. And she's a resident.
Oh,
Wow.
cool.
Yep.
Well, welcome.
Extra exciting. Yeah, welcome. Thank you.
Exciting.
So exciting. We've been looking forward to having someone in the role, and you're clearly a go-getter to be here tonight on your second day. So thanks for coming.
Can you bring up the agenda?
Go right ahead.
I wasn't going to do this, but to fully embarrass Bettina, this was a very interesting hiring process. We had 50 applicants for this position. We interviewed initially about 10 and then narrowed it down through the search. And Bettina throughout the process was our top candidate, although we had really fabulous, very different kinds of candidates. So she comes to us with a lot of climate engineering experience at all levels of government, and we're really thrilled to have her here.
Oh, wonderful. Thanks for joining us. Anything else? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I just want to say the flowers on the table are for Jessie because it's her birthday.
Oh, happy birthday, Jesse.
I did bring some celebratory cookies. These are gluten-free if you need gluten-free, and these are German cookies that are really quite good.
Oh, I know what those are.
Pardon me?
And I know what those are.
Yeah, so
Go to-
please help yourself and have some along.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Helen.
It's like a little birthday celebration.
I feel like I want a half a cookie. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to. Well, maybe I just need to take a whole one. Okay, well, I think we'll leave the agenda as is, and you can leave your flowers up. They're quite decorative. Let's see. So open to the public for items not related to the agenda. Does anyone have anything not on the agenda? Okay, not hearing anything. Do we have any other announcements that anyone wants to talk about? Okay, we're going to jump right into item 5. And we are very excited to have Jesse Baker, our city manager, joining us today to walk us through the presentation.
Thank you. And Alana should be down here momentarily. She has a economic development committee meeting that is just wrapping up. So she will come down. Do you want me to share my screen?
Sure, go ahead. Do you need permission?
Yes. Fair.
Oh, I think I'm not logged in. Can you give permission?
You want cookies?
You want cookies?
I'll never turn out.
I know, there's 2 different kinds. You can have one of these. Here. Yeah. You go too, please.
Oh, I will take one.
Good. You are very welcome. Jesse, do you want anything?
No, okay, thank you.
I forgot how much I like the planning commission. This whole month off, and come back to nice cookies and fun group.
All right.
Yes.
So I will get started, but Alana will join me momentarily. Alana is really our community development. Alana's our community development director and really the kind of lead person in the city managing the TIF district. So for the record, my name is Jessie Baker. I have the privilege of serving as your city manager. And I love the TIF district and city center so much. I'm here tonight on my birthday to talk to you about it. So do with that information what you will. So I wanted to start outside of South Burlington. One of the most interesting things about my job is probably about 3 to 5 times a week, somebody calls me or stops me at a conference or at a meeting and says, "Oh my gosh, I was just at Trader Joe's and I saw what you guys are doing. How are you doing that? What is South Burlington doing?" I'm not exaggerating, many times a week. I think as the state faces these parallel challenges of a housing crisis, a climate crisis, and addressing affordability, City Center is really achieving progress towards addressing all of those crises. And communities across the state are really struggling with achieving that which we are achieving here through City Center. And in fact, it's exactly what leaders in our community envisioned decades ago when city centers first started appearing in city plans and whatnot. So thank you for that. For those of you who have been part of this process for many years, thank you for that privilege and the honor I have every day to champion City Center and talk about what we're doing here in South Burlington. So tonight, as you all address the form-based code and look to modernize it and fine-tune it, I'm a firm believer that all zoning is always about 80% done and can always be incrementally improved upon. So as you are thinking about doing that in your next couple of meetings, Alana and I wanted to come to you and provide some context as you think about how changes to your recommended land use policy could best support the vibrancy and financial goals that the city has had for many years. So through this presentation, and I believe it's in your packet, we're going to talk about what City Center is, what the form-based code is. This will be repetitive to some of you, but we thought it would be useful to kind of start from the baseline. We're going to give you some history. We're going to talk about some of our successes to date and the projects underway. We think you have a good idea of this overall, but we want to make sure it's all presented comprehensively, and then go over our financial models. Does that work for you all? Good? All right. So we're talking about 2 different things here. We're talking about the purple outlined form-based code district, and we're also talking about the blue outlined TIF district. So while they are not exactly the same, there is a lot of they mutually influence each other to a great deal. One of the things Alana and I often talk about when talking about the TIF district is the concept at the state level of the but-for clause and the impact that TIF infrastructure and TIF financing can have beyond just the borders of the TIF district. That is a huge advantage for communities. I saw that play out in Winooski. I'm certainly seeing that play out here. And so it's part of why we like to talk about City Center and TIF together. So just for a quick history for those of you who haven't been here since the beginning. So in 2012, yes, the TIF district was officially established by the council and then approved by VEPC, the Vermont Economic Progress Council, the next year. We took our first debt vote in 2016 and the form-based code was adopted. We are currently sitting in 2025, as you know, so we have now passed our debt issuance phase. We have incurred our last debt and are working on our last construction projects. And we will continue, hopefully, to incur debt through 2037 and not beyond. And we'll talk about that later. The reason why I am doing this slide and not Alana is that I wanted to have the opportunity to sing Alana's praises, as well as our finance director, Martha Machar, by receiving a clean TIF audit in 2023. As you have probably, yes, very, very impressive. As you probably know, under state statute, the state auditor is required to audit all TIF districts every 5 years. They often make headlines. They often are very politically charged. And our TIF received a clean audit thanks to Martha Machar, Martha Lyons, and especially Alana Blanchard. So we want to talk about our development successes to date. So since the creation of the TIF district, we have added $70 million of new grand list value in the TIF district and welcomed residents in 516 new homes. We also have 52,000 square feet of commercial space and a library and city center that belong to the community. This statistic was staggering to me. We had 116,000 visitors to this library last year. Really a core community hub. The idea of being a city manager in a city hall that's anchored by a library is an enormous privilege and an enormous kind of vote of strength and confidence to the community about what one's local government can do for them. This year, we're going to collect 1.1 million in TIF proceeds, TIF increment to pay that debt service on those capital projects that we have invested in. But more importantly than the numbers, we have a whole new neighborhood. We are seeing this neighborhood, for those of us who work here 40, 50, 60 hours a week, we see this new neighborhood just bubbling up around us every day. And it is such a joy and privilege to see. So as you probably read about, the Rick Marcotte students named this new public street between the Catamount Run buildings and City Hall, going back to Rick Marcotte School, Detilio Drive this year, and we had a parade with the students. It was lovely. Rick Marcotte's students often use this auditorium for performances. They always invite staff, which is a really lovely thing. We see Illuminate Vermont, our street festival, going into its 3rd year. And of course, we're doing more recreation programming in City Center, specifically at Goose Park and in the senior center and whatnot. So we have this whole new neighborhood that has been created. People are living here, they're shopping here, they're walking to work and biking to work. It's really exciting to see. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Alana to talk about her expertise around TIF. We'll let you click.
Good evening. Thank you for having us tonight. It's amazing to see how far the Form-Based Code and the Tax Increment Financing District has come since 2013. And 2012, we talked about the actual beginning. And just this map is a great illustration of how much construction has occurred. It also shows that there's a lot of space for things yet to happen. You know, it's amazing because there is commercial spread throughout the Form-Based Code District. There's residential. It's incredible to me when I leave on a dark night to drive up Dorset Street and see the new building at the end of Dorset Street that now anchors this, amazing boulevard. And then Market Street, it's incredible just to walk down during the day and to see all of the residential units that have been occupied, that have people there, and to see the new spaces that are ready for new businesses to come in and how those buildings really frame the street. There's trees on the street, there's bikers, there's walkers, there's strollers, there's, skateboarders, all kinds of things happening. And it's really, really exciting. So in terms of TIF investments, you're sitting in one right now. Market Street has been completed. Phase 1 of City Center Park has been completed, but there are several projects that have not yet broken ground. So the bridge over I-89 for pedestrians and bicyclists, the streetscape along Williston Road that will continue that bicycle walkability across this really important east-west corridor that goes across the top of City Center. Garden Street, which will bisect the downtown, bisect Market Street, and connect Dorset and Williston Road, but then also really tighten up those intersections on Williston Road, at Heinsberg Road, and at Minas Drive. And so Minas Drive in particular will become a 4-way intersection, and Heinsberg Road will also get more pedestrian and bicycle accessibility through improvements. So together, all of these projects are TIF district financed. Some of them are in the TIF district, some of them are outside the TIF district. They help to build a walkable, bikeable downtown. They also help to catalyze this future development throughout the Form-Based Code. We've been investing in other things as well, recognizing the incredible potential of City Center, which we're just starting to see. So this signals on Dorset Street, which are now they're now smarter. So they have an algorithm for each individual light, and down the pike, they're all going to start talking to each other and working as a team to better allocate traffic along that corridor. very first project, the box culvert on Market Street. And then many private investments in buildings like Allard Square next to us. And then we're looking forward. Illuminate Vermont, which Jesse mentioned, really brings people into our downtown. How do we get it to be that exciting place that we've always envisioned it being? I always find it exciting, but I'm kind of a nerd about that kind of thing. But the City Center Green Study has gone to the City Council, and we're working on moving that forward. We're also looking at managing parking. You know, right now parking is free. That means that if I have a business, a resident could just leave their cars in front of my business, whether they have one car or two cars, and they can sit there all day. With parking management, we'll be able to make sure there's the right turnover to attract businesses that make people want to come to our downtown. And then we're also partnering with Rick Marcotte Central School to look at ensuring that people have safe ways to get to school. So this really illustrates those last four projects and the overall picture for the TIF district. Our investment is 72 million. That's city investment, federal investment, and TIF district financing, and then a variety of other sources. So that will build that walkable, bikeable connection across and I don't know if you can see, so across this Williston Road corridor. But then with the Garden Street project, bring that connectivity across Market Street, and then with City Center Park, the boardwalk connection, allow people to walk south through the neighborhoods and then connecting to the middle school and high school. So that north-south, east-west connectivity. And then traffic signal improvements are actually a separate project. They do have federal funding, but they're not TIF district financed. And so when we sort of zoom in and look at Catamount Run, which is one of the largest redevelopment opportunities, or the largest one in our TIF district, is under development by Snyder Braverman. A lot of attention paid to it right now. They broke ground, seems like yesterday, and now they're open last summer. So the north side of Catamount Run is now open. The south side is opening next year. And then, or this summer, it's actually this year now. So this summer, and then next year, the last building will open in Catamount Run. And then there's one last development parcel left just on the south side right here that will likely be a larger building. So Catamount Run has welcomed so many new people. It's also brought new retail spaces, and those retail spaces are located along Market Street on both sides, and we've seen the first business coming in. And those spaces also, they offer a lot of flexibility, but we've seen from the advertising that they have a real vision for those spaces. So we know it's a little messy right now. It's really hard for a retailer to invest in a new area. But as the area builds out, we've seen some early folks express a lot of interest in these spaces. And they're willing to invest in what is going to be a much higher end build than, like, you know, an older commercial shopping center, which is a lot of our existing spaces. So we're very excited with the vision that has been expressed for the types of businesses, and I'm going to show you that in a moment. And we're looking forward to, as the next buildings open, to that becoming a much more clean looking, vibrant commercial area. And sort of like the newest commercial area in Chittenden County. And I just want to say that we're really grateful to UVM and UVM Medical Center for investing in this downtown that has really accelerated what has been a very difficult market to build in. And so it's been a huge asset to have their partnership, not with us, but with the private sector on these projects. And so this sort of gives you a tally. This is across the form-based code. It's not just in the TIF, or it includes both the TIF district and outside the TIF district. So just a tremendous amount of housing that was not here before. And then, yeah, So it's the commercial square foot does exclude hotels. I want to point that out because that kind of makes all the numbers a little crazy. So this really focuses on the retail square foot. So when the TIP district was established, it's an economic development tool. It's the biggest economic development tool in the state. But the goal of the community was not just economic development. The goal of the community was to build a downtown and to use this tool to build what South Burlington did not have. So it also made us gave us the opportunity to become more fiscally sustainable. Downtown forms tend to be more efficient in terms of providing services and so forth. They also tend to be more efficient from a climate perspective, and I have some data on that down the road. The other goal with the TIF district is that, it's risky. You're investing future money in a project to make something that makes that future money. So it's definitely an investment. And so we wanted to make sure that taxpayers are not on the hook in 2038, which is when all the debt gets paid off. By building a downtown, we're increasing the taxable property. So that builds more revenue down the road once the TIF district ends and that financing is fully serviced. And we want to do it in a way that is in accordance with the law, like everything that we do. But in this particular case, we do want clean audits. So our total TIF debt, and we now cannot incur any more TIF debt. We're at the end of the period during which we can incur debt is 29 million. As Jesse pointed out earlier, we are currently collecting 1.14 million to pay debt service in this fiscal year. And we expect that we know that as additional buildings are completed, that number will continue to climb. Yeah.
For just a quick sec. So just to state perhaps the obvious here for a minute, we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive into the finances, not because that's within your kind of authority to control. That is the purview of staff and the city council. But the tools that you have at your disposal, along with many other partners in the city that we will talk about, are what will make this TIF district financially successful or not over the course of the next decade and a half. So we really want to make sure that you had a clear understanding of those finances, because as you pull your land use regulation levers, that will incentivize or de-incentivize future growth that will add to the financial sustainability of the TIF district.
Yeah. Sorry.
Sorry, may have joined him. So just to clarify, I know it said like last project was in 2027 on the first slide. If we're saying building to work to go online and be built in 2030, would that revenue also be added to paying off the TIF debt?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have incurred all of the TIF debt to date. We still need to use that debt to build the projects. We will continue collecting revenue on new development until 2037. So 2037 is the last year that we collect revenue.
Okay. So 2027 is the last project we're building. Am I understanding that correctly? Or
so we expect to have everything completed by 2027.
Okay, got it.
Of those last 4 projects.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great question. So this is sort of an overview of this, how a TIF district works is that this is really just of the revenue side. So it's looking at, as you build each year over that 20-year period, the tax revenues that are collected grow. We keep a portion of the education fund taxes as well as the city taxes within the boundaries of the TIF district. So it's not like the taxes are any higher. We're just keeping a portion of it. The state does make the ed fund whole, so it's not taken out of, it doesn't affect our district in particular. So over 20 years, as the tax revenues grow, as the buildings grow, the tax revenues grow, and that at the end of the 20 years, those buildings are still there. they haven't disappeared. So those, all of those, 100% of those tax revenues then go to the city where they would have otherwise, and they go to the state ed fund. However, the reason for the TIF district is without those investments, you wouldn't see that same growth. So our TIF district with the buildings, with, you know, our new downtown anchor of City Hall, with the walkability and bikeability supports a considerable amount of development that would not have otherwise occurred. So, and this is, shows you how those, what happens with those revenues. So the taxes on the existing properties that were here to begin with, so Healthy Living was here before 2012. All the taxes on Healthy Living continue to go 100% where they would have before. Now, any building that was built after 2012, so Trader Joe's was built after 2012, so 75% of the taxes each year on the municipal taxes and on the ed fund taxes go into a special fund. Those are used to service the debt for these projects. So that's how it works. So you have many projects, you have debt, and that new development that comes in is critical to be able to collect the revenue, to put in the fund, to then service the debt each year until that debt is paid off. Our debt will get paid off in 2038. So we do modeling, and I'm going to show you the end result of modeling, which shows we only ever develop what is in the pipeline. So what's been permitted, at least at an environmental level, if not at the city level to date. Or we build enough to pay off all the debt, or we build, you know, kind of what we have the capacity to build. So this is the model. And so this shows what's known in our pipeline. If we build 35 units annually over 10 years, and that's approximately half of a building that's at the corner of Garden and Market Street on the side next to the stormwater pond or the Goose Park, however you want to call it. Or you build that building, 61 units, which is at that same corner, that whole building that exists today. If you build one of those every year over the next 10 years. So just, that's an easy thing to visualize. So that's been modeled to show you at the end of that collection period, 2037, we would have a negative balance. So we would not have enough money to service all of the debt to the tune of 2.9 million. If we built 35 units for over, you know, each year over 10 years, we would have an excess of 2.4 million. If we built 61 units or, you know, one every 10 years, we would have an excess of 4.1. The really important number, that's a really important number because it tells us, you know, whether or not we get to all that revenue comes back to the city in, you know, the following year or not. So it would not come back until 2040. We would continue to contribute the city portion, the school portion, that goes back to the state right away. But we would continue to use the city portion to pay off that debt until 2041. And our annual, what we would get annually is, you know, just about 566,000 annually. At 35 units, we sort of break even. In terms of, I'm sorry, I said that complete. I read the last column, not the second to last column, but our annual revenue would be 856,000. So as we have more units, the annual revenue goes up, and we get the funding sooner. So that's the gist of this. You look like you have a question.
I was sorry to clarify. So the TIF fund surplus column in the no pipeline, it's 500,000, and 35 units, it's only 30,000. I'm a little confused. I would have thought those numbers would be swapped.
Yes. So the completion year is different in the 2040 year versus the 2038 year.
Okay.
So that's why there's a surplus that year. So we've serviced the last that, or we sort of zeroed out the deficit. I don't like to say deficit, but we zeroed out that red, so that so we have filled that hole.
Let me explain it the way. So one of the goals of the TIF district not only is to successfully retire the debt by 2038, when we talked about that with the voters when they approved the TIF. It is also to build our grand list to achieve other community aspirations the community has. So at the end of the TIF district, the general fund, the city's budget will get additional dollars into it as a result of expiring the debt on all of the projects. So that column, the new 2038 general fund annual revenue, is what we're looking at for new money every year moving forward into the future to do new innovations, aspirations the community has. So that column, that 856,000, we would realize in 2040 if no new development happened. We would realize $1 million of new revenue in 2038 if we had 35 new units of homes added a year.
And the final column is, so, that's the one-off surplus for that 1 year.
One-off surplus, yeah,
Okay, gotcha.
exactly.
More? Oh, sorry.
Oh, yeah. I guess the question that came to me is that do you see anything other than residential going into these
Yeah,
areas?
absolutely. That's a great question. So I use that one building as because we had a recent assessment of that value, I used it as a model to just help understand how much development would be needed. If the first year it was an office building, that's usually valued at it's assessed at a higher value, even though rental is very hard and the market is very hard for that. But from a assessment perspective, that would bring in more revenue and it might lower those numbers. So this is just a way to see how much development would be needed with a number that's a known number.
Do you see potentially more owner-occupied buildings happening there, which might add a different kind of value and vibrancy to the community?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question, and I think that's a bigger question. I do see that, but I know that in talking to developers, I think that there are some regulatory things that may have happened after 2008 that inhibit condominiums. I do not see single family homes in this location, maybe townhomes.
Yeah, I was
yeah.
thinking more multi-story townhomes, potentially mixed business and residential.
Yes, and so I think that's a big question.
And that's certainly
yeah.
something that we advocate for with the developers a lot, is
Yeah.
that that mix of both the housing mix of what we see in city center, as well as the commercial other usage that we see. I think, and most of this is regulatory tools for you, what you want to envision for uses and requirements for mixed use properties to be developed. But yes, that's something we advocate for strongly.
Do we have a sense of the proportion of, of commercial versus residential in the 70 million that we increased the grant list?
I could calculate that, but I don't have that broken down in specific to the grand list.
Yeah. One good thing I noticed that 16% of the total housing units are affordable, which is a good number for us. I'd like to see that. The other question is probably moot at this point, but I wondered whether we are accounting for, with an increase in the grand list, are we accounting for the increased requirement and cost of services? I know it's easier in a very dense development like this, much easier than out in the sticks, but are we, because you're going to rely on it for additional funding for your general fund and education funds, and there'll be an offset there.
So that's certainly something that we think about as staff a lot, of that cost of service delivery with density or with sprawl and the difference in those two development patterns. Hoping that will be a big part of our discussion around our growth management plan in the years to come. Just a reminder, we are retaining 25% of that municipal increment to support staff operations. So we are seeing that return to us as well. And as you suggest, it's much, you think about an assessed value of a multifamily apartment building versus the assessed value of one home on 1 acre, and the requirement to plow and the cost of that gas and the cost of that staff. You have many more people paying for it in a densely populated area than you do in other areas of our city. So the return on that is higher in a dense city center.
I just had a question on that, the first figure there, the 2.9. That's with known development. If I'm reading that correctly, that means we don't have enough known development to meet.
Right.
The
Basically, if nothing else happens in the TIF district other than what you see under construction right now, that's the result. We don't think that's going to happen.
That's a worst case scenario. Yeah.
Exactly. But I think it's our financial obligation to present what that kind of worst case scenario is. And, again, think about what are those levers that we all have to pull between, our downtown collaborative, between land use policy, between city policy, between partnerships with developers in the private sector, all of those pieces to come together to make sure that that worst case scenario doesn't happen.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but knowing that it's a worst case scenario, that $2.9 million is the responsibility of the South Burlington taxpayers.
Yes, that's why we don't actually retire the TIF until 2020.
Right, but that becomes not, we don't get 2 more years of retaining the 75%. That's entirely local money that has to pay those last 2 years. Is that right?
So we don't retain the education 75% anymore.
Okay.
Be solely paid by the municipal property taxpayers. But I believe this model envisions only retaining it in city center. So not raiding the general fund in other areas to pay that back.
Oops.
You can go.
Yeah, just, it was kind of a related question. I was just wondering if there's some realtor or who's actually marketing these properties, and hopefully they're marketing them to some different developers so that we can get some different looking buildings and, have a little bit more diversity in the kind of buildings and the look.
So I think we actively are marketing these properties. I think as a city, we are aggressively we're aggressively reaching out to people who may be interested in redeveloping properties. But I think it's incumbent on everyone to make sure that people know about the incredible opportunity that City Center offers. And I can't say as to who might be interested. So
Who do they talk to?
yes, please send them my way.
I think it's also agree with everything Alana just said, and Alana and I both spent a lot of time talking to landowners and developers. I think it's important to note that the buildings we see here, and maybe I'm going to switch ahead to Alana's tween slide, but can come back to it. We're all controlled by one landowner and one developer, right? That's pretty unusual in a TIF district. It can be perceived as a negative thing when architects remain the same or engineers remain the same. It is a huge, as Alana said earlier, it is a huge advantage to us that they catapulted forward the growth much more quickly. But when you think about other parcels in city center developing, those are owned by different folks who will use different architects, who will develop at a different period of time with different investors. The tweeniness that, we're 12 years old right now is influencing that. We are very much in the progress of building city center. We've done that primarily with one partner to date, and it is hopeful that many other partners will come into that mix as well. But as Alana suggests, words matter. It is up to the entire state, the entire development community is watching how we as leaders, how you as planning commission, how the council talks about city center. If folks want to invest here, what it means to invest here as opposed to investing in another community. And that's part of this conversation, is how do we all mutually champion one another's work to ensure that we are realizing the goals of this community.
Well, we're also working on amendments to the form-based code
Yeah.
to encourage
Definitely.
diversity and a different look. Yeah, I mean, we have a bit of a canyon here, but that's the way it is. Yeah, in many of these visioning systems, people wanted the city center to look like something. I said, well, if you want to look like that, you have to buy the land.
Well, I would just, I'm jumping into Alana's slide here. I disagree with that statement because I think city center, especially as the buildings are finished, is beautiful. You know, I walk the street every day. I see it all times of the day and night. I think I can envision what it's going to look like when there's restaurants and retail on the first floor and there are shops spilling out onto the sidewalk. It's really hard to envision that until it happens. It's why it's a city center is a tween right now, right? We're trying to like see what this is going to become and feel like into the future. It's hard to see it right now. If we as a community talk about how it's awful and not what we wanted, developers aren't going to come here and do cool things. When we talk about it as the center, you know, the growing center of Chittenden County, where all these cool things are happening and new investments are happening and new street festivals are happening, that's what's going to make it interesting and vibrant and new folks wanting to come.
No, I don't disagree with you at all. When we have cafes and coffee bars and all the rest of it, and umbrellas out on the sidewalk and the village green, and it'll look a lot different. But right now, we're not there yet.
Can I, and I guess this is where it feels like our job comes into play. Like if we take our amendments we're working on and we make them extremely difficult for someone to like implement them because we have crazy ideas, or we make it less easy to build, then, you know, if you go back to that last slide, like we're gonna make it harder to make that jump between what's known and kind of this extra amount of development that we really need to make the financial targets. So we really need something in between the first and the second rows. That's like to kind of break even, because I mean, it looks like there's an excess. It's like halfway between is kind of the.
I think the second row is what is break even.
Oh, that's break even?
So the second row is break even.
So even though there's 2.4 million extra,
No,
you're
that's
considering that.
the 2.4 million is the balance at the end, but the surplus that's you still have one more year to pay off. So the completion year is 2038. And so once that last piece of debt is serviced, you have 29 million left.
Oh,
29,000,
okay.
sorry.
Yeah, I didn't
It's
understand that
confusing.
even after Colin's
Okay.
question. The end is, so the last column is actually
Right.
the end.
The other thing about the 2037 is that showing, I show it because it shows the top line really well, but the balance for the other scenarios include ed fund money, and that ed fund money goes back to the state. So that's what makes it look like more money. So the actual TIF fund surplus just has the municipal revenues. So what we would receive as a city, but despite the fact that there's also a deficit in ed funds, we still have to pay it. So
Okay, so our goal is to make sure we're creating rules and things that would enable us to get to this second line, which is,
right.
and you've picked an example
That's
of,
just an
like,
example.
of
So
what will get there.
right. So some of those properties, they're 100% retail corner, on Dorset Street. So that's probably not going to be all residential. But this is an easy way to visualize what is needed on an annual basis or as an average.
So
Please
something,
jump in for a quick second.
yeah.
One, it's not easy. Like it's hard to understand. It's a hard financing tool. I guess I do want to reframe your question a little bit. What we're trying to show here. So the financial success of the TIF is just one of the goals of the TIF district. So yes, we want to retire the debt, and we're trying to figure out how to communicate what we need to do, like deregulate or make regulation more predictable, in order to achieve that financial goal. I think what we don't necessarily as a team want to do is say, okay, once we've hit that goal, we're done. because I think there's a larger goal about city center around being a true downtown that is a dense neighborhood in a community that has a lot of conserved space where we don't want to develop. So if we want to continue to meet the state's housing goals and vibrancy goals and workforce goals, having an area of the city where we continue to develop and continue to build is important outside of the financial goal. So I guess I would think about reframing that a little bit to not be like, okay, what do we have to hit and then we're done, as
Yeah,
opposed to how do
I
we
wasn't
achieve the
thinking-
financial goal?
I wasn't thinking hit it and then done,
Yeah.
but like just the scale of what that means in this narrow time frame is about an additional 350 units, using your example,
Right.
but it could be a mix of different development types and and then I think the other question is like that increment, like is there so say there's a property that actually has something on it right now, like a restaurant or some business of some kind, and then it's redeveloped, so the increment is actually quite a bit less for something like that.
Yes.
So it seems like we've been really quite lucky that a lot of the development that has happened was on kind of open land, so
Yes.
the increment is
Yes.
bigger.
Get harder.
So-
Yes, so in the model, like we've done some of the easier sites from a financial standpoint for the model perspective. So if you look at an individual year in the model, there's like 1 or 2 years where there's barely any growth because you're removing value to add value.
Can you remind me, there's a fair amount of property owners. So what they're thinking about in redeveloping their smaller piece, even if it's open land, is a whole nother level of discourse or just different opportunities. But how many different landowners are there? Which I think would lend to having things look different. If you own the property and want to develop it, you won't necessarily go to Snyder Braverman to say, build it for me.
I don't have that number off the top of my
Okay.
head, although I should, because I'm putting in the annual report to the Vermont Economic Progress Council tomorrow. So I just filled it in last week.
Okay.
But I can get that number for you. But I would say, I can probably just pull it up right now as we're talking, but I would say it's I would say almost 40.
Yeah, I was thinking 38, but that's a
Yeah.
number from years ago.
Well, that includes San Remo Drive properties.
It
right?
includes San Remo Drive, it includes Mary Street.
Mary Street, right?
And it does not include the university. To be clear, the University Mall is not in the TIF district.
Was that?
Does it
not
include the
eligible
Blue Mall?
for TIF? Or was it?
Sorry. So what is included in the TIF district is everything that was eligible in 2012. And so it doesn't include the University Mall.
Part of the issue with the mall, I vaguely remember, was the area. So we made the blue TIF as big as we possibly could. And we had to pick things that we thought were like most likely to actually be redeveloped and incrementally improved during that time frame. So there was a lot of discussion about the
It
mall.
was a combination of that, and in order to qualify for all the things that you ultimately become eligible for a TIF district, you had to have certain types of zoning in place. And at the time, the U Mall was in the general C1, and so it didn't qualify yet. Was something that you captured in 2016 with the form-based code. So it was a combination of all those things.
On that note, is there any discussion or consideration? Is adding another TIF district to some of the other areas within the form-based code district on the table, or is that a way too big question for tonight?
Great question.
That's a great question. Right now, there would need to be some changes at the state level.
Oh, so we can't just keep adding more TIFs?
Yeah.
Okay.
Limited number.
I think they had to make a change to even approve ours in the
They
first
did.
place.
They made a
They-
special
they're-
change.
They were already maxed out on the number allowed in the state.
I'm allowed by the legislature or what?
Yeah.
Huh.
Well, the
It's-
impact on the education
Yeah.
is substantial, so you can't just kind of do it willy-nilly.
Hmm.
I mean, I think they wanted to manage that.
While it's not pertinent to this discussion, we shouldn't forget the economic multiplier that's involved here in jobs and business in general, that the development of city center will provide for the community as a whole. It's a
agree.
big number.
That probably applies to the mall property too, Colin, like, you know, because there's all this excitement and new things happening around it, I think it might spur more things at the mall too, like that's kind of what you were talking about, like.
Sure hope so.
So when Alana and I first met with the new owners of the mall property who bought it in 2022, they specifically cited that the reason they're a national company, the reason they invested in it was because of the city center vision and the TIF district and the planned capital project. So absolutely that growth, that is the point, that like the growth in a TIF district bleeds out over the boundaries of the TIF district for sure.
So I can keep
Going.
going, or we can keep discussing, or, you know, I think we all have the image of city center as a 12-year-old, you know, it's very much in progress, a work in progress. And even Catamount Run, which is next to us, you know, like for me, when I think about that project, I just remember seeing a young woman and a much older woman. They were obviously related. And I'm like, wow, you know, like just it made me think of like stories like what's going on here? Like one of them sitting on the bench and the other one's talking to them. Are they moving in? Are they showing mom around to this new place that they've moved to? It just brought up so many stories in my head. And it was something that I had not seen in our downtown before. So it seemed more like a place that people came to, but they weren't like living their residential lives in a mixed use space, which was pretty amazing. So it's like very incipient. It's just coming. Hang on. And you know, another thing is that I often take transit to work and I see so many more people at the bus stop when I arrive in the morning and they are leaving to go to work either, you know, at UVM and I see some head nods over there, you know, or at UVM Medical Center. I also see more people riding their bike on US Route 2. So there's like more activity here that was not happening or had not been happening for the many years that we have been here. 46 units an acre. That is incredible. And that's an average. So that includes the townhomes that are, you know, about 12 units an acre averaged with the, you know, Garden Street apartments or the Allard Square. It does not include any stormwater ponds that are on a separate lot, but it does include any lots that are considered part of the same ownership. Obviously, you know, the stretch energy code that is required in this area that means that these buildings are much more efficient than buildings that have been built in the past. And I do, you know, it's amazing to me. I see people come to the library with their kids after school during story hour. And then if I chat with them, I found out, oh, you know, they're going over to the Blue Mall or they're going over here, they're going over there. So even though we may not have those businesses right co-located next to this building, people are walking and biking around the downtown in a way that I don't think that they were before. And we have all of these incredible assets like grocery stores that enable people to do that. And then, you know, we do have 22 EV chargers in city center. So we are moving towards those 2030 targets in city center in a way that is pretty amazing. So, and we'll continue to. And then this is part of the leasing plan that Snyder Braverman has been advertising. So through commercial leasing agents, I pulled this one off one of their sites. So this lays out, you know, what their interest is in terms of leasing and what they're looking for in terms of leases. And you can see Blissby is opening in January, which is really exciting. And just so this is the north side of Market Street. So there, and you can walk along Market Street, there's that little plaza area and you can see how and sort of start to imagine, how that restaurant is going to spill out into that plaza area between the two buildings.
So just to kind of come back to where we started, we know you have done a lot of work historically to write the form-based code and incentivize everything that's happened today. And we know you've done a lot of work in the last couple of months and will continue to in the next couple of months to think exactly about what the chair talked about of what are the levers, how do you write code, recommend code to the council that incentivizes the vision we want to see in the community. And there are lots of other partners in this work with you, not in the land use work, but in the vibrancy and envisioning city center work. So we have the South Burlington City Center Collaborative, think Montpelier Alive or Downtown Winooski, those downtown organizations that really help support businesses and grow vibrancy. It's a private nonprofit working in partnership with the city to grow that vibrancy. Lissa McDonald at Rick Marcotte Central School has been a huge partner in thinking about how our youngest neighbors participate in City Center and show up in City Center. Really thinking about having an urban elementary school in our community, I think is really exciting. And there's been a lot of leadership there to embrace that vision and partner with us in activating City Center in that way with our youngest neighbors. Obviously, library events, senior center events, and as Alana talked about, in the beginning, thinking about how we organizationally manage parking in city center to ensure that there is that turnover and invitation to new folks to come into town. So you're not in it by yourselves. There are a lot of us working, trying to pull in the same direction. And we really thank you for the work that you've been doing and being champions of City Center with us, and are happy to have more discussion or answer questions. Paul, did we miss anything big that you wanted to add?
No, I think you've covered it pretty well. Thank you.
Yeah,
Ooh, 2 thumbs up.
congratulations. I think
Me
this
too.
is great. It's very exciting
up.
to see.
Our presenters don't always get the double thumbs
I
up.
know.
Yeah,
Um,
keep up the good work.
are there any questions up here or things that you'd like to ask presenters?
Just go fast.
Yeah. I just have one little question. Is there anything about this that keeps you awake at night? Well, I know you're very positive and you need to be, and I think there's an incredible amount of potential. So that's a very positive thing, and your comments about the mall are very reassuring. I wish they'd move a little faster, but it's reassuring. And clearly when people stop you, Jesse, and say, what in the world are you doing? This is so cool. That should be very positive. But, is there like one thing that seems like, ugh, this is really going to be hard?
So there are 3 things that keep me up at night. One is, so I've worked for 4 municipalities. This is the first municipality I've worked for that doesn't have paid parking, and it is a joy to work without
keep it
paid
that way.
parking. Paid parking is a bear. It is absolutely critical to maintaining, especially a vibrant commercial district. We will not have a successful city center if we don't have visitors and shoppers that are turning over regularly to support the small businesses we envision. And it is a political challenge to implement, and it will be very frustrating to South Burlington residents. So managing that keeps me up at night. As Jessica brought up, the development we've seen to date in City Center is really the greenfield development is the easiest development. It will get harder when you're thinking about tearing down an existing building and rebuilding. The margins get tighter. You have to displace tenants. You have to change businesses. That will get harder, and figuring out tools. I think the regulation tools are a big part of that. How do we make it as predictable as possible so that folks are investing in the materials and the building and the size, not in the permitting process, will be a challenge in the next decade. And then finally, I think there's always, for me, I know I can be overly positive and be overly a cheerleader, but I think words really do matter. And I think how we as South Burlington, all of us present ourselves to our development partners, to our residents, to our neighbors, to our region, to our state, really will matter in how successful we are over time. And helping to keep all of us together in that conversation is something I worry about, and I think is a huge part of my job to make sure we're staying aligned in those ways.
Thank you.
I have, I had a really similar question, but I guess my follow-up to that is, are there things that you've been hearing that are difficult for developers, or they come in questioning about our district? We're working on some amendments to the area, and I think we've probably gotten that information kind of through channels, but if there's something that kind of sticks out that maybe we should really be keeping in the front of our minds as we're going through those amendments, it would be helpful to hear from you, because you're hearing it directly from people, probably definitely more than we are. So
Go for it. Me, yeah. Can we get back to you? Can I write you a memo? No, I mean, I have gone through development under the regulations for this building, and I would say two things. One is it is very, very complicated, and there's just a lot of pieces. I think I'm adding sidewalks right now to two parcels that are in the form-based code. And I think, I'm not sure if I submitted 40 or 87 different documents in order to add the sidewalks. So I don't know if there's a solution to that, because there's like stormwater regs, there's like all these different regs, but I will say it is very complicated. And then the other thing that I would say is that there are the form-based code, and then there are other regulations around the form-based code that still apply. And I think you've done some work over the years to make sure that they are consistent with an urban vision versus a suburban vision, but I would say paying attention to that, because I know that can cause, it can be very difficult to work through that.
Yeah.
But I think that's on the fly, and I think most people would appreciate a more thought out response to that question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Paul?
You're looking at building 610 units in the next 10 years in the TIF district. So that is more than we've built already. And how are we going to fit 610 units into an area that is now occupied by 500?
Yeah. So I think it's not more. I think to date we have approved 737 units in the TIF district. And that is primarily on 16 acres, and the entire TIF district is 100 acres. So there are various properties throughout the TIF district which are fairly old. So what this contemplates is that some of those properties would redevelop. Now, that being said, as I said, this is a model, so it's not saying that it would necessarily be units. Some of those sites might be better served by retail or commercial, depending on the owner or the location.
So you need our help with that in terms of amending the form-based code to permit that to encourage that kind of development then.
Yes.
I mean, that's
I would say
what's
that's
kind of up
height
then, right?
and predictability. Height is a big part of it. And predictability, so we can move quickly, or so the development community can move quickly.
So we've heard mention of 14-story buildings, which I think most of us support actually. And where would you envision those being? Because those will obviously be a lot of units, right?
So, I've worked in big cities. I imagine them being everywhere. I think that in city center, in this particular 100 acres of our entire city, where we have seen, where we have heard from the community, is where we want to see growth and development. And when we think about the 50-year horizon or the 100-year horizon of what's going to grow up around us, I think there would be homes for those everywhere. I don't necessarily want to talk about individual property owners because property owners have rights and they have abilities to do what they want. But when you think about Exit 14, Williston Road and Dorset Street and Market Street, what will happen at the University Mall, what will happen on San Remo Drive, to me, that area in 50 years and 100 years is where we should probably have the densest, highest development in Vermont because it's at the busiest intersection. It's not blocking a view of mountains. It's not blocking the view of the lake. It's really, steps, bike rides, feet away from some of the best jobs, the best professional opportunities in the state. If we really want a dense community where people can live and shop and go out to eat and work and socialize and meet their neighbors, this is where it's going to happen in the state. We have such a geographic, unique opportunity to double down on city center in the next 5 to 10 to 20 to 50 years. I think we have a real moment of opportunity. So to me, it could be anywhere. I think if you want to narrow that, I would say look at Dorset, look at Market, look at Williston Road, those high traffic, high density areas already that are already in the heart of our walkable and bikeable downtown.
Part of the TIF district.
And part of the TIF
Yeah.
district.
I had one other question that that I've just been curious about over the years. A lot of the development has been non-revenue producing development. For example,
Pardon?
non-revenue producing development, like where we are right now. I mean, we're not paying taxes on this building or this property, right?
No, we don't pay taxes. on this.
And Allard Square doesn't.
They pay taxes.
They do pay taxes. And UVM next door, they're paying taxes.
Yep.
Oh, so most everybody's paying taxes.
We're the
Yeah.
only ones who are. I wanted to be very clear because I think this is a common misconception about the housing that UVM and UVMMC is invested in. So they are investors in a private sector development. So those buildings are all privately owned. UVM and UVMMC are investors in it, but don't hold an ownership stake. They pay their full freight of property taxes. And all the rights that those two entities have to those buildings is a right of first refusal. So if they're not using those homes, they are going back onto the open market. So these are our neighbors that would be here in our region anyway. They just happen to be having access to these buildings more directly right now. That's not to say that will be the same into the future once that financing relationship ends.
True for Allard Square too. So almost everybody's paying taxes then, except the pike-
Everyone is except the city and the school.
except for us. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
The other thing I would argue, and this is getting way into the taxation weeds, but maybe to Mr. Meethag's point, is that while we don't pay property taxes on this building, so we're not contributing to that increment, the number of times Alana and I hear stories about the mom and the child coming to story hour at the library and then going over to the Blue Mall and getting a smoothie, or walking over to the U Mall and doing whatever shopping, or walking to Target. Those are all local options taxes that are staying in our community as well. So while we're not raising property taxes, that economic activity of having a library in a senior center anchor city center is an economic driver that I don't think we would see otherwise.
And just anecdotally, I'll say that when we first went to the Vermont Economic Progress Council to pitch the TIF district, John Yeager, who was a staff person with the property owner here at the time, made a very impassioned pitch to say, you should include something like the library city hall. They had never done that before, because if you look at the models of really successful Vermont downtowns, that's an anchor to the downtown. And so I think he specifically talked about going to the Lost Nation Theater that is on the third floor of
City Hall. Yeah.
City Hall in Montpelier, and how that is an anchor to then people going out to dinner and doing all these other activities. And so therefore the presence of a facility like that, of a public facility, is core to making a successful downtown. And it was a very successful argument. And because it was true.
the truth counts sometimes. Yeah.
I'm not seeing any other questions. This was extremely helpful. I don't know if you have anything else that you wanted to leave with us or.
Um, just the last thing is thank you for the work you're doing. It is hard, it is detailed, it is complicated. Thank you for that. And while this is the first time we've been here, I think ever together and in a while, call us back if you have questions or would like information. We are always happy to come and have conversations with the planning commission or with any of you individually. We really do want to make sure that we are building and holding as many city center champions as we can. So thanks.
Great, and happy birthday.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies.
And thank you, Alana, for 2 meetings in a row. Wonderful. Well, we are actually gonna kind of run right into this continuation of a similar vein of thinking with the form-based code area. Review of potential updates. So this had been our packet back in December, and we didn't get to it at the time. We had an ambitious agenda, so we'll jump in tonight.
All right, so just one moment.
Here's a birthday, Jessica.
We're starting to dive into draft components for you to be looking at. Tonight's your first one. You're going to be looking at ones over the next couple of meetings. We thought we'd start with streets tonight. So because as Jessica noted, this was in your packet at the last meeting. The memo is largely similar, but we, having had the benefit of a few weeks, we're able to develop some more ideas for you. So if I had some static maps in the packet for you, I'd like to run through a couple of sort of more dynamic maps, and then we'll get right into discussion here. This
think
is
that'll
on the
be
hairy
helpful.
edge of my technological skill set, so bear with me.
And I'm excited about these maps because it was hard to go between the ones in the packet a little bit, and
Yeah.
I'm excited.
Okay, so so I'm going to scroll through some maps. I can go into any of these. These are all dynamic maps. I just was trying to pre-lay them out. Technology decided to change from when I was really good at it a year ago to new stuff that is probably better, but harder for me to use. So this is City Center future land use map. This is just what our city plan says, the red being, of course, the form-based code district, and this green bubble right in the middle there, that's the fields right next to us at the Marcotte School, just as a reference. What you see here on this map, this is the existing and planned street network from the current form-based code. So the existing are all the little black lines, with the exception of, for some reason, I couldn't get it to draw this one. This is Detilio Drive right here that should be there. And the red dashes are from the original form-based code of where the planned streets in the city would be. So for those of you who were on the committee back at that time, the consultant had laid out a first cut of some streets. Because of timing and wanting to make sure that the code got adopted and the importance of the streets to the code, that was put in as a first cut at it, with the understanding that it might need to be refined a little bit in various areas, because when we go down to the actual property level and see what buildings are affected, etc. A reminder that in the current form-based code, all buildings need to be on a street. If you choose, you can build a new street that's not amongst these ones. However, it must be connected at both ends in order for you to build on it. If it is a street that's on the official map, you only have to build that segment on your property. So up in the top left-hand corner here, the replacement of the Holiday Inn with the new building that is up at the top there, they built the first segment right here of that, and that enabled them to build that building. So there is a power to the official map, the planned streets in here, in that they lay out where we have already determined that new streets should go. Moving forward, and I'll come back to any of these in just a
Can you,
minute.
can you hang on a sec there, Paul?
Yes.
Go back to that map, the proposed rerouting of that street near JC Park.
Yep.
Seems like a bad idea to put a street right next to the park where kids are running around and dogs, and there's no fencing there. Why not leave it where it was?
I'll come to that in just a couple minutes. Okay. So in 2018, which now is 7 years ago, amazingly, we worked with a firm to look at what a more complete street network would be. Commissioners who were on at the time did get a brief presentation on that. You were in the midst of your PUD project at the time, and then the interim zoning, and then the pandemic hit, and time went on. But they contemplated for us, looking at this, the idea of both filling in the network of streets to create some normalized block sizes that would both enable development and also sort of create parcel and block sizes that make sense for construction. And then secondly, look at creating a tiers of streets that would have different roles. And so looking at this one here, I don't want to spend too much time on this because it's a little bit older, but imagine all of our existing streets essentially being red, like Dorset Street over here and Market Street. And then saying the primary streets after that would be Garden Street. And then the secondary streets beyond that would be this northern one adjacent to behind Williston Road to the north, a connector road starting on the Poon property across the street from us, tertiary roads being ones that are maybe not intended to have buildings placed on them, but where they would have the form of a street. So if you think about, let's say, it's not a perfect example, but if you think across the street at the U-Mall, there is a primary circulation area, and then there's the drive aisles, and they serve different roles.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea in here would be that a third level street, that's in this example, a yellow, might be a drive aisle like right behind us at City Hall. And then the fourth level is a new one, as conceived by them, this blue, that would be just making sure that we have driveway connections in a thoughtful way that is interconnecting everything. So it's already in our regulations that you have to connect properties from behind, but there isn't a stated goal of sort of making sure that it all gets stitched together in a logical way. So it can sort of jump all over the place now. So that was their concept back then. This is a refined version of that we wanted to have an initial conversation with you about. There's a lot going on in this map, I acknowledge, and I apologize. But the symbology here is that if it's a solid line, it's existing. If it's a dashed line, it is proposed. And there's a new color in here, which is green, and the green is in response to some of the conversations you've had with us of thinking about a planned pedestrian-only network.
Mm-hmm.
So some of this already exists on our official map, pedestrian and bicycle, excuse me. So this is already on our official map, the bike ped bridge over the interstate, a connection up to Dorset Street right here. There are existing components of it in various places, including through Dorset Park. This is, Dumont Park. This is a TIF project that would be funded to connect Dumont Park up to Garden Street and to Market Street. So some of these are happening that are not private sector responsibilities, but we wanted to show a concept of how these could all connect together over time. So, as an initial, and Michael, I'll get to your question in just a second. We were, as outlined in the memo, we were looking at sort of marrying this idea of connecting our street network together in a predictable way, making sure that the development community has things that they can start to work from, and creating this hierarchy of streets that would both enable more to happen, but also maybe acknowledge that in some cases there needs to be a little more relaxing on the current. In the current form-based code, basically every street has to be a full front. You have to have all, doorways on every face that is a street, and you wind up with some properties like the immediately across the street with a city parking lot has streets on all three sides of it. It is very difficult to build a building that has doorways on all sides. There's nowhere to go in to park or to have a parking garage or anything like that. Another example of that same situation, and Michael, this is where your question comes in. This site here, currently Executive Drive comes in right here. There are a handful of buildings on this site. It is very difficult to rebuild on any of these properties today. So for example, this is Fred Pete's law office. It has an existing street, a planned street, an existing street and a third planned street. So that means that all three sides of that have to be 70% at least of the width of that parcel, length of that parcel building on it, and has to be doorways all around it, which really means it's virtually impossible to build on a property like that without assembling several other parcels with it.
Executive Drive is a city seat, a street.
It's a private street right now owned
Okay.
by, used to be Craig Benson. He passed away, so it's now his family.
Okay.
But before he passed away, they were starting to have conversations about what's in there is pretty dated. So, so the idea specifically here, Michael, was to move the planned street up to adjacent to JC for a couple of reasons. One, it enables a more full redevelopment of this entire area here. Two, if let's say it were to be redeveloped as presented now, what you would get is buildings that face onto Executive Drive if they could fit it, and then the parking lots and the rear wind up spilling directly into the park. A much more classic version of a relationship between a park and the public is that there's a clear delineation of where a public park is, and if it's designed properly, you'd have a nice green belt, a recreation path, street trees, street parking that is then available for users of the park instead of using up as much of the park itself to access it. And so, it's not a perfect example, but I think of Callahan Park in Burlington, for example, just below the roundabout, is the boundary between the neighborhood and the park. If it were all backing up on it, you wouldn't have quite as much of a sense of the park being to the public.
There's a
So
good
long-
example of that on Swift Street Extension. There's a good green barrier between the park and then there's the Champlain Water right of way. So that within the park, there's another barrier. So that works quite well. We get something like that, it would be fine.
So that was the specific thinking on that one. And then the thought that we've been working towards, and it's in your packet here, is that there would be a levels of streets where the primary streets would be ones, these red and the purple and I guess the red, where you would have to that's where the city would throw its eggs in of saying that's where we want to make sure that there are strong street presences for the buildings, doorways, etc. The purple, like these ones back here, would require buildings to be placed on them, but there might be some lesser responsibility for it to be the entirety of that width, just acknowledging that it can start to be a little bit tricky to build out the entirety of a frontage. And then these orange ones, specifically looking both north of Williston Road here, and then if ever, there are no plans, I'm not trying to start any rumors, but if ever there was things happening in the Blue Mall area, that this would be a planned connection as a third tier street. You would be able to it would enable buildings to be placed on it if you have built the other frontages first. So if you've built out along Market Street and Dorset Street, then you'd be enabled to build another building back there, which would both support infill development, but also be a way to encourage and allow for some smaller buildings, which I know is smaller footprint buildings, which I know has been one of the things that you all have been talking about. If there's no ability to build on these other streets, then naturally you'll only build really big buildings to cover the entire frontage. Donna.
When you say the word street, I mean, I kind of imagine some of these that are marked in red, specifically Mary Street, except for the access point. But I'm thinking that we have a real need for what would be called a limited vehicular access street,
Mhm.
which would be largely pedestrian, but it allowed. No, it's a pedestrian street, meaning that vehicles can access it. Anybody who lives or works on that street can actually drive there. But for the most part, the public is not going to drive there. You know, they're going to walk there. And because we need those strong pedestrian connections between Williston Road, that triangular piece, that pie-shaped piece just screams out public park to me. It just really screams
Which,
the pie shape, right across from City Hall.
oh, right.
Maybe not all of it,
Boom
but it's
crowd.
a nice pie.
Mm.
It's a nice piece of pie, right there, smack in the middle. And to have a very limited access pedestrianized street, which ends up there in both directions, would be quite nice.
So this is some of our initial thinking about the green line. And I confess that we did not distinguish yet between green lines that are sort of overland, that are really sort of crossing wetlands and things like that versus green lines that could enable exactly what you're describing. But Nick and I and the rest of our team have had conversations about, what if there's currently a planned roadway essentially more or less in the location right here by the Blue Mall. It's a very awkward location for a planned roadway because it splits this block a little bit too small. As you know, if you're driving on Dorset Street, you get one traffic light and another one.
Right.
And furthermore, originally, right where I'm drawing my cursor, this was planned to be a roadway connection from the end of the triangular shaped lot down to San Remo Drive. But due to the size of the, and frankly, open water of the Potash Brook right here, that was not approved by the Army Corps and the state wetlands folks. And so that was removed as a connection. There's a lot of stormwater activity that takes place in there. There is a path that exists along here. It's an overland path. It's not a paved path, but which then creates the problem of, where's that road supposed to go? Because it was supposed to connect south, but it does open up the opportunity for exactly what you're describing of potentially right along the edge, the southern edge of the Blue Mall property, which also has a couple of out parcels, possibly on the either east side of the Blue Mall in the event of a infill back here, or whatever might happen, whether it's a Village Green or development on the Poon property, to create that kind of opportunity. Exactly that.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a pretty it's becoming much, much more common too, that those, bollards that raise and lower so that, people that are supposed to be able to access that, that they can drive vehicles into there, but it keeps regular pedestrians out. Actually, I guess they were in the process of putting those in New Orleans on, that street where the tragedy
Bourbon Street.
on Bourbon Street. Yeah, that was something that they're putting in, but they weren't in yet, because that could have prevented that tragedy.
Another place where something like that might make a lot of sense, you'll notice this purple line is one that you've talked about before, across the Unsworth and Village Green apartments. And you gave us the directions your last meeting to connect Ruth Street over to Market Street. There's a lot of space back here that could be a thoughtful place for some infill. It is also bounded on the backside here by the Potash Brook. It makes sense to plan for a pedestrian connection over to the Price Dropper Plaza over here, to make sure that we're being thoughtful about that. It also might be a great opportunity if we write it in the code for some kind of a little cul-de-sac that is a pedestrian first street. It would still need to, be able to handle fire access and things like that. So one of the ideas that we'd had is, while streets that are not on the official map need to be connected at both ends in order to be eligible for development, that could be potentially not the case for a pedestrian first street, so that you could have a little stub that goes somewhere, and maybe it's, you'd want to connect it into this planned connection up to Price Chopper and Midas, but you could enable some small versions of this while maintaining the transportation needs of the overall grid.
And I think it would go a long way towards kind of realizing that very special aspect of city center, which would be walkable, because to have some spaces that are, primarily pedestrian, I think goes a long way toward achieving that, and, allowing those connections to go through from Williston Road all the way down to San Remo would be terrific. And then over, that connection we're talking about, potentially over to Heinsberg Road. It's like, those are the things that make a area kind of delightful place to be, is having those little secret passageways that everybody knows about. But
And
they're
along those
fun.
lines, you were talking about San Remo Drive earlier tonight. We've been working on San Remo Drive is both a place that have a lot of small parcels, and it's also one really big block that is sort of too big in and of itself. It functions like a lot of smaller blocks today because there's driveways that cut everywhere. But imagining a future, and how do we both support investment and redevelopment, and also create these breaks and these, pleasant experiences. We've been looking at what if there were some planned, thoughtful, pedestrian forward connections through the block. Right now, there is one planned street right here. That planned street in and of itself is a substantial obstacle to redevelopment of the adjacent property, because the properties are so small that taking 60 feet of that for a road, and then there happens to be a very expensive Green Mountain Power utility box that would be the responsibility of the person doing the redevelopment to move into the multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars. It basically makes those properties very difficult to see investment in. So if we were to think about how do we create the same positive space, but if instead of 60 feet and moving a utility box, it was 30 feet and a pedestrian focused area, all of a sudden we can take the same connectivity and make it a lot more viable.
Well, and it could potentially have construction above it too. You could have buildings bridging over that kind of an area, space as well. Especially because we're starting to
hadn't
talk
thought
about
about that, but that's a
potentially
fair
taller
point.
buildings there. You start having buildings that are 5-6 stories, having a 2-story pedestrian walkway. I mean, there's some lovely examples up in Ottawa where they do this. And, you know, and actually the city hall is amazing because you walk through the city hall and I think that is like a pedestrian walkway that goes right through City Hall. It's not open, but it's open to the public and you can go through it. And then it takes you right into the next area. You know, there's these continuous pathways that are really pedestrian.
That's interesting.
Colin?
Yeah, it's been a while since I've been there.
I do wonder, I want a question, so when looking at this network, in both the San Remo, both the San Remo block, that huge one, and then also one a little farther north between Market and Garden. Would this kind of place be a place to sort of start kind of trying to think also about opening up more pedestrian crossings over Dorset Street? I just measured it. So the Market to Garden is about 750 feet, which is kind of big in a urban context for like pedestrian distances. That's like a standard kind of New York City block for reference is like 250. You know, I mean, 750 is decently large, and the San Remo one's like I think 1400, which is just kind of a chasm from a pedestrian standpoint. And I'm sort of curious. I don't know if this document's supposed to do it, but like, for example, like that little pedestrian one, those are all kind of existing properties like San Remo, but at the very least trying to think like, I don't know if this document is a place to start to look at would we potentially look at have some kind of mid-block pedestrian crossing there to just make it a little more walkable. And similarly, I guess you couldn't really extend those streets out probably because of the way it's already exists developed. But like I want to example further north, like in the Market, the Garden Street, whether it makes sense to sort of continue that pedestrian street into the U-Mall property to then really kind of encourage. We like the idea of having some kind of pedestrian crossing there because 700 feet, it's not terrible, but like if we're trying to get this is like a downtown hub, you really don't want to have a 750-foot crossing distance for pedestrians. This doesn't it feels like more audio oriented. So sort of that was, I guess, my comment is I worry that the more that we build this out, the more, and this is also from my perspective of living on Shelburne Road, where the lack of crossings really makes it feel like this giant chasm that divides the neighborhood in two. And I think that's might become more of a feeling that people might get if like we have crossing distances over about 500 feet or so as this area builds out and densifies with more pedestrians and stuff like that. So
I think that's a great point, Colin. And something we'll spend some more time looking into. Specific to the U-Mall property, we haven't talked about this much at all, but we've been we've met sometimes with the property owner, and we've been sort of identifying that the needs of that property may be a little bit different, not in terms of the outcomes of what a form-based code achieves, but the process by which they get there. It's a huge property. It is one property that is 65 acres, mostly either paved or built today. And by necessity, whatever they do will be incremental. It will be, it'll deal with an existing building that is not actually one building, it's multiple buildings within the one building. And so there's, as that property over the decades gets rebuilt, it's going to happen in segments and sections. And there is currently in the form-based code no allowance to do a master plan. It is done as a site-by-site code. We think that this may be an opportunity to bring in all the work that you've just completed a few months ago elsewhere in the city and connect it in to enable and possibly require for a certain scale of property to do a master plan that would then allow them to get some predictability in the short term, predictability over the long term in terms of, laying out the pedestrian and street connectivity and their civic spaces and where they're going to put their stormwater while they still figure out over, many, many years what the development foot plates site by site are going to be. They've expressed some interest in beginning to have for their own clients or their own future clients, known development foot plates that they can start to market in a few years' time to say, here's a 1 acre site that would be great for a 2 to 4 story building. And it's going to be, knowledge for the person that they're looking to lease or sell it to about, it's going to be on the street, the park's going to be across the street from it, without having planned out the actual full design of the building. But here's sort of a layout. So we think that that could be a really strong tool and could connect exactly what you're saying. And this was really just a placeholder for tonight's conversation, but you see this diagonal
Yeah.
pedestrian line. I wasn't
That's
actually
clearly not supposed to be straight through.
straight through,
Yeah.
but it is the reason that we drew it this way is
It's the node you want to connect.
is to note importantly that the bike ped bridge, which is going to be a $20+ million investment from the public sector, and Market Street are core critical destinations amongst one another, and whatever happens in here needs to prioritize that as a connection. That sending somebody down around the back of the mall long term and then all the way here is not success for a
Right.
for the public investment that's been made and the utility of that area. So I think we can probably set in some standards like we do elsewhere in the city to see how areas get broken up to have pedestrian connectivity throughout and across.
Oh, no, thank you.
Anything to- I don't know.
Um,
that.
No, I just wanted to mention also that one of the goals for a pedestrian primary street, or however we want to put it, would be to enable a developer to create sort of like a courtyard access and to be able to build out those kinds of building forms where you've got a number of buildings surrounding like an area that is both a travel area but also an actual public area. Similar to what Paul was mentioning with like a cul-de-sac that would have that might be built around a pedestrian area.
All right. Yeah, thanks. And one other question I had was the whole notion of interconnected driveways.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm curious to hear first, what is sort of the main argument for them? And but that sounds like a bit of a leading question. And so I guess where it's coming from is I feel like I see in a lot of cases where you have very interconnected driveways, like for example, that 570 Shelburne or 510 Shelburne, that big one just went up on Home Ave or Farrell Street and Shelburne. They've got interconnected driveways. You're already within like a week of it being opened. You're seeing a lot of people whenever they get stuck at a red light at Farrell, they just cut through the property to avoid having to wait at the red light for 20 seconds or turning right. And that's something that strikes me as probably undesirable, and people essentially cutting through this residential property to avoid a red light. So I guess my first reaction when I see all these is it makes me think of, people are just trying to bypass traffic or becoming these weird people rushing through everyone's backyard trying to do little shortcuts. So that's my gut reaction. So I guess I'm curious, what is sort of the counter argument to that / like why
Sure.
do we need these?
Sure. So one note about Shelburne Road, the former Kegel Sitco, is that it was way more cut through 5 years ago.
Sure.
Agreed.
Agreed. Yeah.
So I think that the strongest argument to look at, and I was about to go to this area next because you last month approved submittal of a planning project with the Regional Planning Commission next year to look at the Mary Street intersection and how do we fix this sort of, the traffic light is by the hotel, but the street is a block away. What's the long-term solution? Because what we're hearing from the private sector is they need to know, basically they need the transportation solution in order to start making the investments. So related to that, one of the biggest barriers to Williston Road transforming itself into a more pedestrian oriented environment is that every single property has a driveway onto Williston Road.
Okay.
And so as a result, if you're, even with the future recreation path that's going to go in there, the wider shared use path, there's still going to be curb cut after curb cut after curb cut, which is really difficult for a person to really make a pedestrian oriented space. The idea of this yellow line would be to encourage and require backlot connection such that over time we can incentivize and work with the property owners to close some of those curb cuts and allow the vehicular access that may still be needed to be coming around the back.
That's
Okay.
like San Remo Drive.
I mean, San Remo Drive functions a little like that today, yeah.
Okay, yeah,
So that would be that would be an argument for it,
I-
because until we do that, there's really no way to to eliminate any of these curb cuts.
okay, do we have like the regulatory power? Because I mean, my experience, property owners really hate giving up curb cuts. Like, do we have like how do you say pressure? I definitely agree with that vision. Like, realistically though, can we actually convince people to make their only entrance not on Route 2? Seems that most of them are like, I want both. You know what I mean? Like,
Right. Yep. No, it's not going to be. It's not easy because it is right of access is once they've got it, it's very hard to
Yeah.
to require them to remove it. But until we create the opportunity, I guess what I'd say is until the opportunity exists for something else, it's a non-starter, period.
Mhm.
You know, some of these smaller properties have the potential to see some investment, but the width of the property, including a driveway, makes it that there's no there's very little opportunity for them to invest in it. There could be a time when they see, well, you know, it's not my ideal to have to not have a driveway on, but the dollars of what I could get out of the investment outweigh that.
Mhm.
Um,
especially I guess if it's coupled with high frontage requirements on the primary road, I
Right.
guess it becomes very hard to put a driveway in.
Right.
So I guess that's sort of back to a regulatory way of doing it.
Yeah, and of course, you know, there are properties that will, in a more downtown setting, corner properties to traffic lights or streets become more and more and more valuable. And so thinking about what is the ultimate positioning of this traffic signal, that also is its own tool. Everybody, of course, would love the traffic signal to be next to their property.
Yeah.
But right now, the system along Williston Road is pretty outdated, such that it's not really serving anybody's goals very well.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I
I-
guess I'm not sure. So I guess the vision is kind of, I don't know if it makes like Back Bay in Boston sort of comes to mind. Have you familiar with that area? It's a bunch of like 4-story townhouses
Yep.
and all the driveways are in the back.
Yeah, and a much
Yeah.
smaller version of it. It's not an exact match, but a smaller scale version of that is Manchester, Vermont, has a lot of connected back parking areas that wound up being shared, and then you know the street itself, Route 7 and whichever the one that goes in out towards not Route 7, 7A, I guess. 7A.
Old 7.
20 old 7 is, you know, in the core has a lot. Not everybody has a driveway connection in there, and that's been, you know, it's a multi-decades effort. It's not a short-term thing.
Oh, so that's been more recent.
St. Albans has that too,
Yeah.
like their main blocks all, just you go.
Right.
around.
And, you know, if we could do it all over again, we'd do it a lot more like Market Street. But this is the long-term retrofit.
Gotcha.
So
Go ahead.
while we're here, these orange dash lines don't
Yeah.
match up with the study recommendations, and they actually go right through the school building.
Yep.
So I guess I'm just wondering how realistic that is versus like the way it was shown in this study.
Yeah. So, the example of the school building is a really good one. So our current form-based code has it going right here, basically along the school property. Back in 2014, 15, when this was developing, that was an open question about what was going to happen to the school. That's much less of an open question now. At the same time, in working with our Deputy Director of Capital Projects over in Public Works, Eric Quallen, who is a traffic engineer, and looking at this, that the utility of having both a new signal somewhere in this area and then another one here and then another one at this reconfigured White Street might be too many for vehicular. And so placing the responsibility of any plan connection on these tiny little properties might be a lot. And so our thinking, at least at this stage, was to sort of take a little bit of a hybrid of both the recommendations from the 2018 VHB study and also retaining the original one of, with no expectations that the school is going anywhere, just keeping the status quo. So as to not bring them into a whole new discussion that is implying something that is not in the cards at all at the school district. But we're open to other ideas on this too.
Well, I guess, making this new map and putting that line there does kind of imply something.
Well, so this orange dashed one right here is on the current visual map.
Oh, okay.
So I guess our initial thinking, and this is really, this is one of the areas that I think we struggled with the most, was it might be better to just leave a thing rather than opening up a new conversation to imply that we've got a new plan for the current school property. An option could be to remove it altogether, and that would be likely consistent with anything that's on the school's radar. And I have no knowledge that the schools are even contemplating any future there. However, the reason it was originally put on the map was that 10 years ago it was under consideration. And so if we think about 30 years from now, would your future versions of yourselves want to have had a planned road there in the off chance that something does happen to the property?
Don't they already have a road that's a curb cut? They don't use it anymore, but it used to be the
They
old
have
way
one
you got
right
into the.
here.
Yeah.
It's sort of a little driveway, and
Mhm.
it is used, as I understand it today. In the mornings, the gate is opened up for those who are walking to school.
Oh, okay.
And then closed back up just for security reasons,
Because it used to be a road.
or at least a driveway. Yeah, it's
Well,
Maybe
a
it's
driveway,
Yeah.
when that
But-
was the old school, that's how you got into the school.
Yeah.
And the parking lot in the back.
Right.
I believe. It was
I think you're right. Yeah.
2 or 3-story brick old fashioned building.
So this may need some more
Yeah,
work.
it feels like it maybe needs a little more work, and just it might be interesting just to think a little bit more on where it's shown in the study.
Yep.
I know it looks like it cuts through the school playing fields and then through one of those little properties.
Right. I think this one here is the McDonald's, if I'm right.
But it does look like there's almost like a loop road
That's
around it.
McDonald's?
This one here, yeah.
Oh, because they used to have a drive-through.
Yeah, I apologize for not having the aerial photo on there. Again,
That's
hairy
okay.
edge of my technological skills.
But I don't know. This just feels like one maybe to revisit as a
Okay.
group and think through.
This yellow line specifically, I think, is the one that we have, that conceptually we feel good about, but in practice about where the alignment is, especially as you get up here, probably still needs some work. Whether it even needs to exist at this end, I'm not sure.
Definitely very hard for vehicle access right that close to that light might be a little,
right. Right. So it might be that I think that it was originally drawn here by VHB because that's right in front of where the hotel is. And so it functionally already exists. But if we think into the future, if ever that property were to be redeveloped, that building would be going right up to the street. So maybe the access would actually start over at Mary Street or something. I wanted to show one more area that has not been on your radar at all up to this point, but we've had sort of offline conversations in the past, or at least I have with folks from various neighborhoods about envisioning how we might see a pedestrian connection linking Mayfair Park and the various individual streets. This would cross, this is sort of the edge of the St. John Vianney property, so it would involve likely working with the diocese on that. But today, informally, this one already exists. If you walk out there, people walk there every day. It's an informal connection. You can see it right through there's no grass there. This one could happen at the end of Hayden Parkway, but there's a fence there. And we don't have an access into Mayfair Park, but this is sort of an idea and something of, how in the future, working with one or more of these property owners to, that's not a short conversation, but to look at the possibility of right of access
Is
somewhere.
that where the cemetery is?
This is the cemetery here.
Okay,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the cemetery itself is very welcoming of people out and walking, but it's
Yeah.
the more the connections to the adjacent properties. Right now, if you live in Mayfair Park, the two ways that you can get to and from city center are up along Williston Road, and then either along Heath and Ruth or into city center, or way down here at the end of Elson Parkway, there's a path that connects through Prouty right here. And so you can come in there, and this was actually part of the Safe Routes to School this past summer or fall, excuse me. So there was a march route that went through here and then over here and then up to Sunset. And then there's a connection, actually there's a path connection right here between Birch and O'Brien that's a public access and over to the school. So some of what you're talking about, Donna, of like the little connections, some of it exists. There are some more opportunities, like even if we took the same Prouty Parkway one that was done, there's almost the ability to connect Lilac Lane right over here, but not quite. And so, working with the property owners there over time to get those connections. So I just wanted to flag this one as being, we're planning to do a wider update to the official map, but this one seemed very directly connected to city center, so we wanted to toss this idea to you.
What about the connection off the end of Barrett over through the school? Like, you can technically walk there, but like, we didn't really talk about this when we
Oh,
took
yeah.
off the vehicle connection between that neighborhood and San Remo. I think we just didn't scroll down enough on the map to even think about it. Like,
Sorry,
so
Barrett
at the
to-
top, so see that green line
this one
at
here?
Dumont? Yeah, no, the one that goes to San Remo.
Yep.
That used to be a vehicle one, and then
Correct.
we made it into a path.
Correct.
If you scroll down a little bit to the other end of Barrett, down at the school, like where the line just
And
stops.
no, the black line for O'Brien Drive, isn't that O'Brien Drive?
Yeah, there, like that, is there? Do you
So
think there's anything we should be considering here to have some kind of connection? I mean,
I
just
think there's a
thinking
couple
about
things that
like
we could-
emergency access and like,
So there is a paved path that goes from here and then it kind of follows the school here. And then there's a dirt path, a dirt driveway essentially that comes right here that is used very frequently as a connection. That could be formalized over time. I meant to include, and I forgot to include that another connection that we were looking at as a pedestrian connection is right here. To forge that. If ever this is one property, this belongs to PC Construction. It's where they basically store their equipment right now.
It's a big lot.
It's a big lot that's sort of an awkward shaped lot that if this could be a really good example of allowing a building to face onto a pedestrian connection right here, which would both enable development, but also then forge this connection.
To the school, they keep it there.
So it'd essentially be like a pedestrian, primarily pedestrian, but also might have vehicular access for that property or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, or maybe, maybe the building is here and the parking is back over here on that property, right? It's not such a big property that if they put the parking 70 feet away, that would necessarily inhibit development. I think the property owners there are looking at schemes and how they could make that site work.
And that could actually, I see what you mean.
So you could theoretically put a nice building here. It would be very difficult to get underground parking in it because you wouldn't have the distance to ramp it. But imagine if the, say, underground parking were back over here and then they just popped out of the building across the pedestrian way kind of thing.
Those are kind of like shed-like buildings, aren't they?
Yeah.
It's
storage.
It was Pizza
Well,
Galley's, right?
It used to be Pizza Galley, now it's,
PC.
because they
Yeah.
split up, it's PC Construction.
Right.
This is the only property that PC Construction owns.
Oh.
Yeah. So,
Paul, can we go back up to the triangle property?
sure can.
I guess I just wanna, so the map that we got in the packet was kind of like cut off a little bit, like what the
Oh, yeah.
traffic study.
Well, that's because the traffic study ended there.
Yeah, I guess it just, I don't know, if you zoom out the tiniest bit, just to like look at the block sizes. I guess I wanna make sure, cause I know we talked a lot about block sizes and connectivity and building size and there's an awful lot of pedestrian path in that whole middle of the block there.
Right, so
I guess I
this,
just wanna make sure we're not like messing up our connections. And because we're excited about pedestrian connections, because I
Right.
am excited about pedestrian connections, but I also think there's that whole economic and building placement and
Yep.
circulation that we
So
talked
this is a,
about.
this is a tricky spot, design wise. This is a big stormwater pond right here.
Okay,
This is stormwater on both sides of this, for both the Trader Joe's site and the Healthy Living site. So you get stormwater all through here.
okay, so that solid green line basically can't be a road.
Well, so it cannot be a road.
Okay.
So this is a path that can be used today. It is not a paved path, but it is a pedestrian legal connection from Garden Street up. I think that there are some unknowns in this property, frankly. The council is going to be getting some additional reporting in the next couple of months on possible information about candidate locations for City Green. There were 4 sites that were looked at. So they asked staff to do some additional homework and bring it back to them. What decision the council makes about a City Green will then shape the circulation around it. So it's a little bit of like, depending on what if any gets selected, some of these parts are gonna have to, these are moving puzzle pieces depending on that.
Yeah, okay, and that makes sense. I guess just for now, I'm not convinced that the one that goes like from the U Mall, the middle of,
one here?
yeah, that one. I guess I'm just not convinced if that should be green or some kind of yellow or orange. But I think
mean-
you're right. Maybe once we have a better
be
feel
honest,
for
I kind of like that one
what's
because
happening.
I feel that I'm not, at least from a traffic engineer perspective, I fear that having another road cars access in the middle of that block would just make it even more gummed up with traffic. But having pedestrian crossing there would actually be pretty nice. So like, I could totally see that long term becoming like a mid-block pedestrian crossing or something.
Well, and then thinking of this orange one as pedestrian, as a vehicular access. So this half of it already exists. This is the way into Trader Joe's. And then if ever the Blue Mall were to go away, dividing the current official map shows a roadway right here, which is a very awkward division of that property. Dividing it this way might create more opportunities to both sort of have investment along Dorset Street and Market Street and create a separate investment opportunity back here that is focusing the primary activity along our major roadways.
It also
Mhm.
potentially, the
Yellow
back of that site could have a,
Right.
it seems like if that triangular section again became a public park, that becomes an incredibly valuable piece of property just to the west of it.
And this, Helen
And
just
you'd
asked,
want to divide it up into 2 lots then, for sure.
Helen asked what this yellow one is. So this
Right,
is
that's the Blue Mall.
going to exist. This is under construction. So
That's the boardwalk thing?
no, this is again, I might switch over to an ortho photo, but the buildings being built on this site, there's an L-shaped building right here.
Mhm.
This is there's an L-shaped building right here.
Oh, right.
And then the third one that's just starting construction is right here. So this is the driveway connections to serve the parking for these 3 buildings.
Right.
And there are sidewalks along the edge of that. So this will be connection opportunity for people on foot. Also in vehicle in a slow manner. Colin, your point about cut throughs is a good one.
And not the word there. I can't see why someone would cut through
Right.
that.
Well, but we wanted to make sure, so in the development review associated with that, it is a permit condition of theirs that that from time to time that can be used for public use. So in the event, for example, that the city were to close Market Street down for an event, we could potentially reroute the limited local traffic through there. It was, it wouldn't be intended to be, city through traffic, but you could route local folks so that, if you lived at one of these apartments in the Poon property, it would be a real shame to have told somebody, oh, sorry you came here. Now you have to go all the way around the big block. So wanted to maintain connections so that we can have more events.
So that would also send you block off that block directly to the northeast of that yellow road. Right. Essentially. Okay.
So that wiggly line, that's not a stream or something, that's the
That's a property line. Yeah. It's a weird line
so
because
weird.
that's where the stormwater pond is. And so they drew it,
Yes.
the DRB in the review of this wanted to make sure that as much of the property was being reserved for the actual development
Mhm.
and so that they would include actual usable civic
Oh,
spaces. So
they
there's
sort of
right.
drew
So
it around the,
around the stormwater pond. So
Stormwater
right here, they use this little extra tab to be a little pocket park. And there'll be a little pocket park right in here and another one up here. So it looks sort of funny on paper, but in practice, it's going to look
better.
taking advantage of the curves.
So Paul, the dotted line at the end of Market Street is the connection with Midas, but hasn't been built yet. Is that it?
Right up here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the voter approved TIF debt to make this connection basically like that.
Midas.
Yeah. And then right now, this is the Price Chopper Plaza. Right now, there's a curb cut up here that would that creates this yellow connection. Our thinking was if ever this property were fully redeveloped, you'd want to see a real roadway connecting right across there. Creating an opportunity for redevelopment here and a nice big development block here that would, be very different from what exists today. Except
There's a small stormwater pond around there someplace too, right?
right down here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is,
Paul, wasn't that part of Garden Street originally labeled as a bike boulevard where it had bike lanes on like down the middle, or it was a pretty significant
so
bicycle
Garden Street has been
connection.
built with on the south/east side. There is a dedicated two-way shared use path, separate from the sidewalk.
Okay, so it's on
It
one
goes along
side.
one side. It goes along so you can see it's been built both it's been built all the way where you see the red.
Okay, and will that continue through to Midas?
Yes. And continue over to Dorset. Right now it ends at the little bridge right before Trader Joe's.
Yeah.
But so those are the two public pieces to be built yet.
Oh, that's already in the works?
Already in the works, already funded.
Okay, yeah, because
Yes.
I knew that there was some improvements to that intersection, which is
Right.
tight.
That was in
Tight
the
for-
last-
Yeah. So the shared use path part of it would go all the way up to Williston Road, which would then connect into the other project that we have going of building a
White
shared use path along the south side of Williston Road. So that would connect directly there.
Yeah, good.
Other notes so far, this is a little bit of still a work in progress, but we wanted to get your take as to, are we on the right track generally? And I think we've got some good feedback on it tonight.
You haven't gotten feedback from developers yet, or?
On this?
Yeah, you've been working with them.
We've been working with them. We haven't shared this version of the map yet. Well,
Well, they've seen
it
it
depends
now.
with whom. With some of them, we've already talked about it. With others, we have not talked about their specific implications. So I have not talked to the property owners here about this minor realignment. We have talked with the U-Mall about it. and sort of conversations remain ongoing.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and also, you know, the access and circulation and frontage build outs, all these sorts of things that are implicated in this sort of planning effort were big subjects in the roundtables that we had with developers in the summer. So we tried to incorporate as much of what we learned from them during those process into this area. Seeing as the whole thing is really a holistic effort.
Very, one looks, what, I just noticed at the end, have we figured out how the bridge is gonna get through the Staples Plaza yet? Like yeah.
So short term, yes. Longer term, there's more to be done. But I will bring that back up.
Yeah, because at the moment it's pretty narrow sidewalk. It's sort of standing between the
So
parking lot and Main Street.
immediately as part of its construction, there will be a shared use path that comes up to meet Williston Road right in front of
Yeah.
the Staples Plaza. And it will be connected into this section of road exists right here, and there's a shared use path in front of it. So this will be connected up to here. That's the short term.
But
Long
short term, you'll see biking down that sidewalk, basically.
right. Or the there are bike lanes here too. Well, I use them daily when it's not snowing. There are bike lanes through from the top of the hill.
Yeah, but if you're going westbound, you have to like, there's no way to cross there.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
There's still more to be done on
Yeah.
this. We initiated a project last fall to start to talk with property owners. We started with the north side of the street. Talking with especially UVM about what their long-term goals are, because there's sort of a partial path that exists along this, what is now called Catamount Drive up here.
Yeah.
That sort of double tree entry. There is parts of a path that exist and part of a bridge that doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah,
And
it's like broken or something.
Yeah. So we've been talking with them about their long-term goals in this area and how do we match up to create more connectivity. So more to be done in that for sure.
Okay, thanks. Got you. Thanks.
So Paul, you mentioned several times the issue of doorways on 3 or 4 sides of the building.
Yeah.
And the doorways really were, the intention of the doorways was to recreate the 19th century town or village. So, I mean, we're obviously not doing that now. So, you know, I mean, it's not, I don't see it as being an issue anymore. I really don't, you know, I mean, it's like, I don't know what we need to do to make it possible to build the way we want to build, but obviously that's what we're going to have to do. I mean, we're not going to be building 19th century buildings, all of which had, you know, I mean, you see in all the towns and villages have doorways every, you know, I don't know how many per block, but several, and they're always fronted on a main street, you know, so.
Yeah, the purpose of the doorways, and we're going to talk about more about this in your next couple of meetings, but the purpose of the doorways was to create a cadence that is similar to, you know, very historically very, you know, successful pedestrian oriented places. It was to encourage there to be multiple businesses and not just one big, you know, pharmacy, for example, taking up 18,000 square feet.
Right.
And also a decision was made with the original form-based code to be a little bit loose on what non-residential uses are allowed on the first floor, specifically in the T5, because there had been no development. We're thinking that we're going to come back to you in your next couple of meetings with a package of things that tries to sort of update some of that might include being a little bit tighter on some of the uses, such that we make sure that this block here and whatever gets built over here is very people generating activities, that it's not just, you know, an office space, but something that is a restaurant or retail, and like the kinds of things that build energy, as opposed to just miscellaneous, accountant's office or something. That might pair itself well with giving other options about how to also make a pedestrian activated space. Some of the feedback that we've gotten in the form-based code is while they understand the purpose of the doors, they could have done a couple of fewer doors, but a much more grand entrance. Some of the buildings in the city center don't have a main entrance to the building on the street at all. So there's only entrances to a handful of dwelling units, but not a main entrance to the building. So what if a lobby was something that was encouraged? Which some of the buildings have done, but some have not. So sort of repackaging that with the same core goal of, to be successful, it's supposed to be a pedestrian oriented space. So you got to peek into our brains. Yeah, it's more to come in a couple weeks.
Okay, is that it
think that's
for
what we got for
big
tonight.
items? We had a couple of things under other business. I don't know if anyone really wanted to talk about any of those. They're generally for our information. Okay,
170
hearing none, are we, any other business? Oh, minutes, I forgot minutes. Minutes of December 10th.
There's one little thing in the minutes.
Mhm.
I don't think I've ever commented in minutes before. ever.
Paul, could you turn on your mic so that, because Sue
One
wants to
thing
know
in the-
what to fix.
One
with
thing in the
minutes.
minutes, and that is consistent with what I've been saying. I was talking about building a 19th century looking city center with 21st century technology. And the minutes say 20th century technology.
I see that.
So close.
So
did
top,
not intend
so
to
that's
build
the
1920s
top of
technology.
page 4, you want to change 20th to 21st.
Yeah.
Okay. Do we have a motion to accept with that change? I'll make the motion to accept with that change. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, any other discussion? All in favor of the minutes as amended?
Aye.
That was unanimous. Very good. So we are adjourned.
Thanks, everybody. Happy New Year, Sue.
You too.
Ooh, it's so big and shiny.
Oh, I did have a question now.
I just saw it.
But